4570 Apologetics Part Number 2. Yeah! Now, part number 2. 4570 has a lot of haters out there on the internet. I don't understand why. It's usually from a group of people who have not used the 4570 very much, or they don't seem to comprehend what the gun is for, or the cartridge is for. And it gets really frustrating because it's kind of a whole lot of nonsense talk when people put this cartridge down. A lot of the haters seem to be addressing it from a position of complete ignorance. They haven't hunted with the rifle. They haven't killed hardly anything with a rifle. They haven't spent time with the rifle, or cartridges rather, with the cartridge. They haven't spent, when I say rifle, they haven't spent time with a rifle chambered in 4570. They just, and they love some other cartridge, usually a 30 caliber cartridge or smaller. They will overemphasize flat shooting, which flat shooting is wonderful and great, but if you've shot anything at any kind of a range, you're going to have to compensate to some extent. And some 4570 reloadings are perfectly fine for their trajectory within a certain range. Depending on how far away you're going to shoot your animals, I mean, most of the hunters that I meet, and I do meet hunters nationwide, don't shoot past 200 yards. A lot of people kill stuff within 100 yards. And people bow hunt and get within 40 yards or less of a lot of things. So while trajectory and flat shooting is really great, I feel like a lot of people overemphasize it a great deal of the time. Maybe be better at walking up to animals or sit in your driveway and order meat from there. But there's also a lot of people that in this group of haters, they're just simply dishonest. They don't know what they're talking about, or they're purposefully leaving out details about what the 4570 cartridge is capable of. When they talk about it, they will talk about cartridges from the 4570 that are at the weakest possible loading point and in the worst possible construction to fail against cartridges from rifles, for instance, like a 30-06. And they will talk about those rifles with very specific reloadings that will match that scenario ideally, while picking the worst choice of cartridges available in the 4570 to compare to it. A quick example, they will compare a 30-06 full metal jacket round punching through wood versus at its peak pressure with a thick jacket. That's not something you really hunt with, because 30-06 being so small, it needs to expand to even hit the width of the 4570 bullet as it just is before it touches anything. So even if the 30-06 expands a lot and the 4570 doesn't at all, the 4570 is the same size in this specific example. And they will state that something like a 300 grain soft point traveling at 1500 feet per second, which is on the low end of what 4570 could do, with a hollow point bullet, they'll be like, well, the 4570 only goes, this, deep into it, while that 30-06 will zip all the way through. It's like, you're taking the worst example of one, comparing it against the best of the other. So there's just a lot of dishonesty when people want to make the comparisons, because the real thing to compare in is in lethality and taking game. That is the only parameter that matters, because if you're hunting with this rifle, that's the only thing that matters. Everything else is numbers and paper, which don't have, it's not that papers and equations have zero value, but if taking game is the priority and those numbers do not yield exactly the amount of capability in taking game, it's not the number one factor. Taking game is the number one factor. And then obfuscation is a big tool that people will use when discussing the 4570, by saying, well, the 4570 isn't that great because its velocity is low. I mean, if we were setting up bullets for a foot race, yeah, there's a lot of things that will surpass the 4570. But with the 4570 sometimes weighing double to quadruple to quintuple the weight, you have so much more mass going downrange to punch through things. Or in the 4570, with loads that are hard cast or any other monolithic bullet, they're going to tend to go really, really deep. And so comparing the worst possible choice of a 4570 bullet or rewriting 4570 to where, like, okay, you want to take a 250 grain bullet in a 4570 and then throw it downrange at 2,000 feet per second, you're taking away the weight advantage of the 4570. It beat its own utility at that point, where things like a 300 grain bullet to a 400 or 500 grain bullet are actually going to be able to be pushed to their maximum velocity within the pressure limit of the. So it just gets to this weird place where people that don't like the cartridge really either are ignorant, dishonest, or they're obfuscating the greatness of the 4570, and it's just absurd, because if everything is kept within an honest framework, you have to admit the 4570 is pretty phenomenal. So the haters of the 4570 are an interesting topic, and they will be addressed more so going forward, but just remember, if you can't be honest and you can't take the best of what the 4570 has to argue as a defense for what makes it great, then your voice is either useless or purposefully a drag on everything else.